So it is Sunday, the 18th of March, the Sunday after St. Patrick's Day. Also the day of the St. Patrick's Day parade in Montreal, which starts at noon. And I'm engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and various other Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. Just starting at the second half hour or so of my protest. And yeah, the sign, one of them that I'm displaying in my hands says Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice sucks you asterisk you, which can also be read as sucks ass. I think you can see the the acronym of the Unitarian Universalist religious community after having Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s picture of an asshole inserted between the two U's can sort of be seen as a big ass. So anyhow, I've been talking about Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice, and there's no shortage of it. Unitarian Universalists, both locally at the Unitarian Church of Montreal and also at the level of the head office, as it were, in Boston, to say nothing of throughout the United States and Canada, have repeatedly perverted justice in various ways. I was just in the last video segment talking about one of the most recent perversions of justice by Unitarian Universalists, specifically the false criminal harassment against me that was brought against me by Montreal Unitarian clergy abuse enabler Sue Montgomery, who was recently elected as the mayor of Côte-des-Neiges Notre-Dame-de-Grâce borough, in which the Unitarian Church of Montreal is located, and even more recently appointed as the deputy mayor of Montreal. So on November 5th of 2017, Sue Montgomery was elected as Projet Montreal's candidate for mayor of Côte-des-Neiges Notre-Dame-de-Grâce borough in an election where she just narrowly beat out the incumbent Russell Copeman, who was with Équipe Coder at the time. He had previously been with Coalition Montreal. Russell Copeman was and still is, an experienced politician. He'd previously been a provincial politician, so he had plenty of experience. He was certainly the most capable candidate to be mayor of Côte-des-Neiges Notre-Dame-de-Grâce. And Sue was basically, I would say, not really suited to the role in a variety of ways, but not the least of them was the fact that she had previously involved herself in misuse and abuse of the SPVM police force and Canada's criminal justice system by the Unitarian Church of Montreal in efforts to suppress my protest in front of the church. This is what's known as perversion of justice. Sue Montgomery had also basically totally ignored and refused to report about the fact that the Unitarian Universalist Association in June of 2012 hired Stikeman Elliott barristers and solicitors litigation lawyer Maître Marc-André Coulombe to have me served with an arrogant and aggressive cease and desist demand letter, which amongst other things falsely accused me of violating Canada's blasphemy law for allegedly, and I do say allegedly because it's not true, making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. When he says ministers of the association, he means ministers of the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is basically the association which groups together, pretty well all of the Unitarian Universalist churches in North America and also a few international Unitarian Universalist churches here and there. So essentially, the Unitarian Universalist Association is kind of like the Vatican of the Catholic Church. It's the corporate head office, if you wish, of the Unitarian Universalist Church in North America, and indeed, to some extent, internationally. Although there are other independent Unitarian Universalist bodies, or Unitarian bodies anyway, maybe not Unitarian Universalists, because that's sort of a very American thing, but there's certainly other Unitarian organizations, such as the British Unitarians. They're not really, under the umbrella of the Unitarian Universalist Association. But nonetheless, the Unitarian Universalist Association, which essentially represents Unitarian Universalism in North America, and to some extent internationally, actually had the unmitigated gall to falsely accuse me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel, because I actually told the truth about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, who was charged, tried, and convicted of the forcible rape of teenage Tibetan refugees, and spent, I believe, 4 years of an 8-year jail sentence at the Correctional Institute of Massachusetts, or whatever they call it. And I also blogged about Richard Buell, who, to the best of my knowledge, is not a Unitarian Universalist minister, but he can be described as a pedophile rapist, because he was in fact charged, tried, and convicted of raping preteen girls who were no older than 12 years old at the times that the rapes took place, and could have been as young as 6 years old, according to some of the estimates, but certainly somewhere between 9 and 12 years old. He raped a neighbor's daughter. He also raped a female family member who was not identified clearly, but I would guess from the age difference we're talking about either a granddaughter or grandniece or something of that nature, most likely a granddaughter. So Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell in Massachusetts was convicted, and I blogged about him. I blogged about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, and the Unitarian Universalist Association tried to pretend that my blog posts were A, unfounded and vicious, which is absolutely not true, and B, were so defamatory that they constituted not just ordinary defamation, but the criminal act of blasphemous libel against the Unitarian Universalist religion. Now, that's what you call perversion of justice, trying to conceal perversion in the Unitarian Church. That's top-end perversion of justice, and an outrageous misuse and abuse of Canada's blasphemy law by Unitarian Universalists, who up until Friday, June 1st of 2012, actually had a several centuries old tradition of strongly opposing blasphemy laws, which ended abruptly on June 1st of 2012, when the Unitarian Universalist religion, in quotation marks if you don't mind my saying so, actually falsely accused me of violating Canada's blasphemy law, thus trying to use and misuse Canada's blasphemy law in Unitarian Universalist Association legal bullying, which sought to intimidate me into memory-holding blog posts about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and Richard Buell. And of course, the whole purpose of a cease and desist demand letter is not just to conceal, what you may have already said by forcing you to get rid of it, but it's also, it's cease and desist means stop. It means like, don't do any more of this, don't, or you're going to be in trouble, So essentially they were trying to completely silence me regarding serious clergy sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, to say nothing of Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, and so on. Anyhow, got somebody coming out of the car, just picking up my picket sign that blew down. I'm going to make sure it's visible. And I got another one blown down over here on the sidewalk. So we shall take care of that one too. not that windy, but there's just enough of a breeze to gently blow down my ticket signs every now and then. So anyhow, so yes, that is a little recap of just some of the ways Unitarian Universalists, pervert justice. But certainly, from my perspective, and I do believe from the perspective of most other people who bother to look into the facts, Sue Montgomery's misuse of Canada's criminal harassment law in an effort to prevent me from exposing and denouncing her complicity in Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse cover-up efforts is just another perversion of justice, and it's current and ongoing. I was actually charged, which is, I was actually thinking the prosecutor, if they did their job properly and, evaluated all the so-called evidence, they'd realize that there's really nothing there and that their hope of obtaining a conviction is pretty darn slim, almost zero, really. But for whatever reason, the prosecutor decided to file the charges. Did so in early January, I believe. I think it was January 3rd that the charges were officially filed. So 3 weeks, shall we say, after my arrest. And so a court date has been set for September 10th, and we'll see what happens. The woman entering the Unitarian Church of Montreal right now attended my criminal trial, if I remember correctly, back in, basically 2001 to 2003. And here's another perversion of justice to talk about. One of the earlier misuses of the criminal justice system and the SPVM police force by Montreal Unitarians. On, I think it was December 4th of 2000, but give or take a day, early December, the first Sunday in December, I was here protesting in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal in the first Sunday in December of 2000 when a SPVM police car pulled up and an officer got out and he essentially told me, I'm here to arrest you, like you're under arrest, period. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This was not something that could be discussed. He had basically been ordered to come and arrest me. His name was Anthony Pompa, by the way. So I said, well, what for? And he said public mischief, or no, I think he said public nuisance. Public nuisance. And I thought, well, okay, fine. Who knew that peaceful public protest, was public nuisance? I mean, obviously it is a public nuisance in a sense, but it's not criminal public nuisance. It's actually a protected right. But nonetheless, that's what he told me, public nuisance. And I was arrested. He processed the papers in the car and let me go on my own recognizance. So I wasn't even taken into a jail cell, which was very nice. He was basically generally polite and respectful and everything. He didn't go out his way to try and intimidate me or anything. He just sort of did his job. But at the end, he said, when he was letting me go, he said, don't come back. And I said, well, what do you mean? You mean like don't come back today, or do you mean don't come back at all? He said, don't come back at all. In other words, he was basically trying to dissuade me from continuing the protest. This is it. It's over until your trial's sorted out, So he overstepped his bounds a bit there because, within a matter of days, I was, legally advised that no, don't worry, you can continue your protest. And so I did resume my protest. If I remember correctly, it was, I'll put it this way, it was either December 31st or January 1st. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but it was very close to the New Year. So, my protest was suppressed for, most of the month of December while I was busy trying to figure out what my rights were and everything, and, what I can and cannot do. But once it became clear that I could protest, and that's the thing too, is I normally, at least in the past, give them a break over Christmas. So I normally wouldn't have protested over the Christmas period anyway. So we have Sue Montgomery here. Oh, she's kicking my picket sign. And it looks like she's going to go kick the other one. I'm not supposed to communicate directly or indirectly with her. But on the other hand, I do have a right to be here. So she's vandalizing my picket signs and no doubt calling the police. So, and she's got a...
Wait. Yeah, no.
So she's saying she has a restraining order against me. Well, unfortunately, the Unitarian Church of Montreal is no longer mentioned in it. So as long as I don't communicate directly with her, we should be okay. But she just vandalized my picket signs. She kicked down picket signs that specifically speak about Unitarian Universalists misusing blasphemy law to cover up and hide pedophilia and rape. That makes her totally complicit in that, as far as I'm concerned.
Wait.
Well, here she goes. Very good. Very good. That's it, Sue. Continue to vandalize